My name is Elena Hart, and I'm 28 years old. 5 years was a long time to spend loving a man who had already started comparing me to a future he thought might serve him better. I didn't fully understand that when I sat across from Adrian at his favorite steakhouse on our anniversary. Not yet. Not in the clean, brutal way I would understand it by the end of the night. At that point, I only knew something had been wrong for months. The way he had started measuring our life against other people's lives. The way every dinner somehow became a review of what someone else had been given. The way one woman, in particular, kept appearing in his stories. Vanessa from work. Vanessa with the perfect taste. Vanessa who understood ambition. Vanessa who, according to him, would never settle. I should have understood then that she was not just a name. She was a comparison. And I was the person being measured against her. That night, I sat across from him in a black dress I had spent too long choosing, watching the candles tremble between us while our $200 anniversary dinner went cold. He barely looked at me. He was too busy scrolling through his phone, half smirking at something on the screen, his thumb moving faster than his attention ever moved toward me anymore. "Could you put that away?" I asked quietly. "It's our anniversary." He looked up like I had interrupted something important. "God, Elena," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're so needy sometimes." The waiter arrived with champagne before I could answer. I had ordered a good bottle, not reckless, not extravagant, just enough to make 5 years feel acknowledged. Adrian lifted the glass, took a sip, and made a face. "This tastes cheap." I stared at him. "It's not cheap," he shrugged. "Vanessa's ex used to get her imported French bottles. The real ones, not whatever this is." There it was again. Vanessa. Not subtle anymore. I watched him return to his phone, double-tapping some rooftop party photo while the candlelight slid across his face. He looked perfectly at ease, perfectly comfortable, like he had no idea he was sitting across from a woman who had spent years building a life with him. Or maybe he knew. Maybe that was exactly why he had become so careless. I folded my napkin slowly in my lap and told myself not to react too early, not before I heard what he would say when he got comfortable enough to stop pretending. Then he did. He laughed at something on his screen, took another drink, and said it casually, like the words meant nothing. "Honestly, Vanessa would never let a guy take her somewhere this basic. That's why she's marriage material." I felt my whole body go still. Not dramatic stillness, not shaking, not tears. Just that frightening kind of silence that happens inside you when pain lands so precisely it does not need to announce itself. Across from me, Adrian kept going. "And you?" He glanced up, gave me a thin smile, and shrugged. "You're literally the last person I'd ever marry." The room did not go quiet. That would have been too dramatic. The room stayed exactly the same. Plates clinked. Someone laughed near the bar. A server crossed behind him with a tray of wine glasses. Life kept moving while mine split cleanly down the middle. I looked at Adrian and saw something I should have seen sooner. Not stress, not confusion, contempt. Easy, practiced contempt. As if I had become the dependable thing in the corner of his life. Useful, familiar, safe enough to insult because he assumed I would still be there when the check came. He must have expected tears, or pleading, or at least a wounded reaction that made him feel powerful. Instead, I nodded once and said, "Thanks for the clarity." His eyes flicked up properly then. I reached into my bag and pulled out the velvet box I had been carrying for weeks. That finally got his attention. His phone hit the table face down. "Elena," he said, his voice changing instantly. "Baby, come on, I didn't mean it like that." I placed the box between us. His expression shifted from irritation to confusion to sudden excitement. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Wait, is that—" I didn't answer. He sat forward so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "I was joking," he said quickly. "You know how I get when I'm annoyed. Open it. Come on, open it." There was panic under the charm now. Real panic. Because for one beautiful second, he thought the night had turned in his favor. He thought maybe I was still stupid enough to reward cruelty with devotion. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." His fingers trembled when he lifted the lid. Then he froze. No ring. No romantic surprise. Just a key. A single polished BMW key resting against black velvet. He looked up at me, confused. Then back down. Then up again. "I don't understand." "It's simple," I said. "You'll need to return the car." His face lost all color. "Elena, the BMW you've been driving for 2 years?" I kept my voice calm. "The one you keep telling people is yours? The one in my name, on my insurance, financed through my credit?" He stared at me like I had started speaking another language. "This is because of what I said?" "No," I said. "This is because of what you meant." He set the box down too hard. "You can't do that." I almost smiled. "Check the registration." His jaw tightened. You're being insane. No, I'm being finished. The waiter hovered uncertainly a few feet away. I reached into my purse, pulled out $200 bills, and placed them beside my plate. Dinner's covered, I said. Your ride home isn't. He looked around the restaurant like someone might step in and restore the version of reality he preferred. Elena, stop. Be serious. I am serious. His voice dropped. Where am I supposed to go? I held his gaze. Vanessa's marriage material, right? I'm sure she has ideas. That hit him. Hard. But not hard enough. Because even then, he still didn't understand how complete this was. He still thought the car was the punishment. It wasn't. It was only the first proof. The rest of your things are already packed, I said. His mouth parted. What? I moved them out this afternoon. He stared at me. I could see the exact moment the night stopped feeling reversible. The movers finish before 6, I said. Everything is boxed and labeled in the parking garage. You planned this? The hurt in his voice would have moved me once. Maybe even a week earlier. Not anymore. I planned a future with you, I said quietly. This is what was left after the truth. He went still, and for the first time all evening, he looked afraid. I leaned back in my chair and let him sit with it. I had a whole anniversary surprise planned, I continued. Your favorite flowers, a photographer hidden near the bar, a weekend reservation I was going to tell you about after dinner. His face emptied. You were going to build something real, I said. Until yesterday. For a second he could not speak. Then anger rushed in to cover the wound. Who told you what? I looked at him and thought about the screenshots. The messages. The way he had called me stable, generous, dependable. The way he had laughed with Vanessa about waiting to see which option gave him the better life. Security or excitement. Home or ego. The safe choice or the flattering one. He had called me the safe bet. The one he could always return to if Vanessa did not choose him. Someone decent, I said. His hand moved toward his phone. Mine got there first. I unlocked the screen, opened the tracker app I had installed the week before, and slid the phone across just enough for him to see it. The speed limiter's on, I said, and the geofence. He blinked. What did you do? The BMW will still run, just not very far, 15 miles per hour, and only within a mile of this restaurant. He looked at me like I had become someone else. Maybe I had. That's psychotic. No, I said. What's psychotic is using someone's loyalty as backup while you test drive another life. His mouth opened, then closed. Around us, the restaurant had finally started to notice. Good. Let them. For 5 years, I had protected his image more carefully than he had ever protected my heart. I stood, picked up my bag, and looked down at the man I had almost built a future around. As I turned to walk away, his voice cracked behind me. Elena, please. I paused just long enough to glance back. The candle between us had almost burned out. You should call Vanessa, I said. After all, I was only ever the last person you'd marry. Then I left him there with the check, the key, and the future he had just talked himself out of. The air in the parking garage smelled like concrete dust, motor oil, and rain drifting in from the street above. Adrian caught up to me just before I reached my car. Elena, wait. I kept walking. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to leave a mark. Hard enough to remind me that for years he had relied on me hesitating, on me softening, on me choosing peace over truth, because truth would force both of us to admit what he had become. I pulled my hand free and turned to face him. Don't touch me. His chest rose and fell too fast, anger and panic colliding under that polished exterior he used on people who did not know him well enough to see what lived underneath. You're seriously doing this in a parking garage? He said, glancing around at the stacked boxes lined neatly beside a concrete pillar. You packed my life into cardboard like I'm some stranger. I looked at the boxes, his clothes, his shoes, the gaming console he swore he barely used, even though it had kept him too busy to notice me for months. The expensive watch case I had bought him on our 4th anniversary, the designer jackets he liked to pretend he purchased himself. Every single item labeled in black marker with a precision that had felt almost surgical by the end. I packed what I paid for, I said. The rest is yours. He laughed once, sharp and bitter. Oh, so now you get to itemize me. No, I said. Now I get to stop subsidizing you. That landed. He looked away first. For a second, I saw the real thing beneath the outrage. Calculation. He was already rewriting the story in his head, already deciding whether charm, guilt, blame, or anger would get him closest to control. Elena, he said again, softer this time, stepping closer. Come on, 5 years. You don't throw that away over one bad night. I stared at him. One bad night. That was what he thought this was. Not the end result of 5 months of betrayal and years of entitlement. Not the death of the future I had been quietly building while he mocked me behind my back. Just one bad night. I almost pitied him for that level of delusion. Do you know what the worst part is? I asked. He swallowed. What? I believed you. His expression shifted. When you said you were tired, when you said work was overwhelming, when you said you were distant because you were stressed, not because something had changed, I kept making excuses for you because I loved you enough to translate your neglect into exhaustion. Elena, but you weren't overwhelmed, I said. You were occupied. He looked over my shoulder, jaw flexing. I could see him trying to decide how much I knew. That was almost the cruelest part of all this. Not what he had done, not even Vanessa. It was the fact that he still thought the truth had layers I might not have reached yet. He still thought he could manage the damage. I opened my car door, then paused. You should probably hear the rest, I said. His eyes narrowed. The real reason this isn't about one comment. He didn't answer. I leaned against the car and let the silence stretch just long enough to make him nervous. Yesterday morning, I said, I got a message from Camille. His face changed instantly. Not confusion. Recognition. Raw, involuntary recognition. There it was. Camille, the woman from his wider social circle who always watched more than she spoke. The one I had always liked, even when she stayed politely on the edges of whatever brunch or birthday dinner Adrian dragged me to. She had never flirted with drama, never stirred gossip, which was exactly why, when her name lit up my phone yesterday, I opened it. And exactly why I believed every word. She sent me screenshots, I said. His shoulders locked. Elena, whatever she showed you, it's not 5 months. He stopped. 5 months of messages, I said. 5 months of you talking about me like I was some backup plan with good credit. His mouth opened. No sound came out. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I did not need to look at the screenshots anymore. By then, I knew them almost by heart. Every line had burned itself into me, not because the words were dramatic, but because they were casual. Casual cruelty is always worse. It means the disrespect is settled. Easy. Natural. I unlocked the screen and read aloud. Elena's solid. She's not exciting, but she's safe. He looked sick. I kept going. Vanessa has more ambition, but Elena's the kind of woman you build with if the fun option doesn't work out. His voice came back, thin and strained. You're taking that out of context. I laughed. It surprised both of us. Out of context? I repeated. Adrian, there are photos of you in Vanessa's apartment, voice notes, dinner reservations paid for with the card linked to my account. Exactly how much context do you think betrayal needs? His face drained. Under the garage lights, he looked harsher than usual, less polished, more ordinary. Just another man who thought he could split himself in two and still be adored from both sides. I never slept with her, he said quickly. And there it was. Not I didn't betray you. Not I'm sorry. Just a technical defense, dragged out only after he realized denial would not survive contact with evidence. I looked at him for a long moment. Do you hear yourself? He raked a hand through his hair. I was confused. No, you were greedy. He flinched. Good. That word fit him better than liar, cheater, or coward. Greedy explained everything. Greedy was why he stayed, why he kept letting me pay, why he still came home to my apartment after nights spent chasing the thrill of being wanted somewhere else, why he talked about Vanessa like a fantasy, but slept under a roof I covered. He wanted admiration and security, excitement and stability, a thrill and a fallback. And somehow he had convinced himself that wanting both did not make him cruel. I stepped closer. Camille didn't just send messages between you and her, I said. She sent the group chat, too. His lips parted slightly. That, more than anything, seemed to frighten him. Because private lies can be negotiated. An audience is harder to erase. In the group chat, I continued, you joked about waiting to see who would offer you the better life. That's not what I meant. You called me the dependable option. He rubbed his face. I was venting. You called Vanessa your upgrade. Elena, you said if she committed, you'd leave me clean. No drama, no guilt, like I was a subscription you could cancel. He closed his eyes. For 1 second, I thought maybe shame had finally reached him. Then he looked at me and said, I was under pressure. I actually stared. Pressure? Yes. I nodded slowly because sometimes the full scale of another person's selfishness only reveals itself when they start explaining. Tell me, I said quietly, what pressure made you tell Vanessa I was emotionally unstable? He froze. Color left his face again, but differently this time, more violently. I held his gaze. That was my favorite part, I said. Not because it hurt the most, because it was so strategic. Elena, listen. No, you listen. You told her I was clingy, fragile, too dependent to handle a breakup. You told her you felt trapped because I leaned on you emotionally while I was the one paying for half your life. He looked down. That told me enough. I had cried when I saw that part. Not because I missed him, because I realized how carefully he had rewritten me to someone else. How neatly he had turned my loyalty into weakness, my patience into something pathetic, my love into the excuse he used to justify what he was doing. The rage in me had not arrived all at once. The first wave was heartbreak. The second was humiliation. The third was clarity. And clarity, once it settles, is colder than grief. Why? I asked. He gave a hollow laugh. Because Vanessa wouldn't have understood. I nodded once. There it was. The truth. He had not lied because he was conflicted. He had lied because the version of himself he wanted to sell required me to be smaller, messier, sadder, weaker. He had to paint me as a burden so his hunger would look like liberation. I slipped the phone back into my purse. I almost booked us a new beginning, I said. His eyes lifted to mine. I had plans for us, real plans, 7 weeks of them. His mouth twitched, and for the briefest instant, he looked like he might cry. That almost angered me more than anything else, because he did not break when he betrayed me. He broke when he realized what he had lost. I didn't know, he said. Of course you didn't. I would have changed. No, I said, you would have hidden it better. He inhaled sharply, and I knew I was right. The silence stretched around us. Somewhere above, a car alarm chirped. Tires hissed over wet pavement at the garage entrance. My own heartbeat had settled by then. The storm had already passed through me. He was just standing in the wreckage trying to negotiate with facts. Finally, he spoke again, quieter this time. What happens now? I looked at the boxes. At this exact moment, you load your things into the car you no longer own and figure out where to sleep. You're serious. I haven't been more serious in my life. He stepped closer again, lowering his voice like intimacy could still be summoned on command. You think she's going to want me after this? It was such a revealing question that for a second I said nothing. Not are we really over? Not do you hate me? Not how could you do this? Only that. Will the other woman still want me? He still did not understand the shape of his own loss. I gave him a slow, almost pitying look. That is no longer my problem. He shook his head like he could not fit me into the version of this story he preferred. This isn't you. I opened my car door and got in. No, I said, this is me after I stopped believing yours. He stood there while I started the engine. For a second, I saw the future I had nearly accepted. Years of explanations, compromises, half-truths, apologies that only arrived after exposure, and a life spent begging to be chosen by a man who kept one eye on the exit. Then I saw the boxes again. And beyond them, the elevator doors closing. And beyond that, a life with no him in it at all. That was the first moment freedom looked bigger than loss. As I rolled the window down, he took one last step toward the car. Elena, he said, voice cracking, please don't tell people. I looked at him through the rain-damp light. For 5 years, I had protected his image in rooms where he quietly damaged mine. I thought about the screenshots, about Camille's note under them. You deserved the truth before he made you think this was your fault. I met his eyes and said, you should have thought about that before you made me the safe option. Then I drove out of the garage and left him standing beside the life he had mistaken for permanent. By morning, Adrian had already started rewriting the story. I knew that before I even got out of bed. My phone lit up at 6:12 a.m. with an unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Ma'am, this is Officer Chen. We received a report that your BMW was stolen. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course he did. Not an apology. Not reflection. Escalation. It's not stolen, I said calmly. My ex-boyfriend is using it. He had permission. That permission has now been revoked. A pause. He claims the vehicle belongs to him. Registration and insurance are in my name, I said. I can send documentation. Another pause, then a shift in tone. Yes, that would be helpful. I'll email it now. The call ended in under a minute. Efficient. Clean. Final. I sent the documents, set my phone down, and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. 5 years. And this was how quickly he chose a lie over accountability. It almost would have hurt if I had not already seen the worst of him the day before. Instead, it simply confirmed everything. By 8 a.m., the second wave hit. His mother. Elena, sweetheart, she said, voice already trembling with rehearsed emotion. What is going on? Adrian says you left him stranded. He said you took everything. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee untouched. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. He has nowhere to go. That's not true. He's been with you for 5 years. And in those 5 years, I said quietly, did he ever mention Vanessa to you? Silence. A sharp inhale. Then, carefully, who is Vanessa? I nodded to myself. Of course he had not told her. Elena, she said, her tone tightening. This isn't how adults handle problems. You don't just throw someone out over a disagreement. It wasn't a disagreement. He says you're overreacting. He would. Another pause. This one heavier, because somewhere between his version and my tone, something was no longer lining up. He's upset, she said finally. So am I. He said you're trying to control him. I almost smiled at that. He drove a car in my name, paid with my money, while seeing another woman, I said. If that's your definition of control, then we're using different dictionaries. She did not answer right away. Good. Let it sit. He didn't tell me that, she said, softer now. I know. The conversation did not last much longer after that. For the first time in 5 years, I did not try to smooth things over for him, did not soften the edges, did not translate his behavior into something more acceptable. I just told the truth and let it land where it landed. By noon, I had blocked 3 unknown numbers, ignored 12 texts from Adrian, and archived a long email from his father threatening legal consequences. I did not respond to any of it because the truth was I did not need to. Everything I had done was clean, documented, owned. There was nothing left for him to twist except perception. And perception only works if people do not compare notes. That was when he made his biggest mistake. He showed up at my office. With her. I was walking through the lobby when I saw them. Adrian stood near the reception desk, shoulders squared like he was preparing for a negotiation instead of the aftermath of his own collapse. Next to him was Vanessa. She was exactly how I imagined. Tall, polished, effortlessly put together in a way that suggested she believed she belonged anywhere she walked into. For a second, I just stood there, not shocked, not angry, just observing, because this was not about betrayal anymore. This was about exposure. Adrian saw me first. Relief flashed across his face so quickly it almost looked like hope. Elena, he said, stepping forward, we need to talk. I kept my pace slow, measured. We really don't. Vanessa crossed her arms, studying me. So this was the woman he had been describing. The safe one, the fallback. The one he stayed with while he figured out if something better would commit. I met her gaze without flinching. Interesting. She did not look smug. She looked curious. You're being dramatic, Adrian said, lowering his voice like that would somehow make this private again. Ending a 5-year relationship over one comment? There it was again. One comment. He was committed to that version of reality. I tilted my head slightly. Do you want me to pull up the messages? I asked. Or are we still pretending context doesn't exist? Vanessa's eyes flicked toward him. What messages? Adrian's jaw tightened. Elena. No, I said, cutting him off. Let's not do that thing where you control the narrative. I'm tired of that version of you. I turned slightly toward Vanessa. You should probably know, I said calmly, that while he was telling you I was unstable, he was also using my money to take you out. Vanessa blinked slowly. That's not true, Adrian snapped. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Dinner on the 14th, I said, scrolling. Charged to my account. Same night you told me you were working late. Vanessa's expression shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. The kind that comes when something small suddenly clicks into a larger pattern. You told me you paid for everything, she said quietly. Adrian laughed too quickly. I do. Mostly. This is being twisted. Should we talk about the apartment photos? I asked. Silence. Vanessa's head turned toward him again. You said you lived alone. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I watched it happen. That exact moment. The moment the version of him he had built for her started to fracture. She's lying, he said finally. But there was no weight behind it anymore. Not after hesitation. Not after visible calculation. I stepped closer, just enough to be heard clearly. She's not the only one you were juggling, I said softly. There's a group chat, too. Vanessa's brow furrowed. A group chat? I nodded. With your name in it. That did it. Her posture changed. Subtle, but definite. Because now it was not just about him lying. It was about him talking about her. Evaluating her. Ranking her. Just like he had done to me. What did you say about me? She asked. Adrian shook his head quickly. Nothing. She's trying to start something. I turned the phone toward her. Didn't hand it over. Just let her see enough. Her eyes scanned. Once. Twice. Then she stilled completely. I did not need to explain anything. The messages spoke for themselves. 5 months of him playing both sides. 5 months of him calling me safe and calling her exciting. 5 months of him waiting to see which future would cost him less and give him more. Vanessa stepped back. Are you serious? She asked, voice low. It's not like that, Adrian said, stepping toward her now. You don't understand. I understand enough. She looked at me again. Different this time. Not as competition. Not as comparison. Just as another woman who had been lied to. How long? She asked. 5 months, I said. She nodded slowly. Then looked at him. You said she was controlling. You said she depended on you. He swallowed. You said you were stuck.
I felt.
You said you were building something real with me. That one landed hardest, because for the first time, his silence was not strategic. It was empty. There was nothing left to say that would not contradict something else he had already said. Vanessa let out a short breath. Then she laughed once, sharp, almost impressed. Wow, she said. And just like that, whatever illusion he had built collapsed completely. She did not scream, did not argue, did not demand explanations. She just stepped away from him, turned, and walked out. Adrian stood there, watching her leave like he had just realized the game was over and he had not been keeping score. He turned back to me, something desperate finally breaking through. Elena, wait. No, I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. This was your choice, I said, every part of it. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once like movement might fix something. You didn't have to do that in front of her. I looked at him, really looked. For 5 years, I said quietly, I protected you in rooms where you were quietly disrespecting me. He did not answer. Now you can manage your own image. Security was already moving toward us. Apparently raised voices in a lobby still counted as a disturbance. Good. Let them see him like this. Unpolished. Uncontrolled. Human. Elena? I'm done, I said. And this time there was nothing left in me that wanted to explain it. No anger. No sadness. Just finality. I turned and walked toward the elevators. Behind me, I could hear him trying to speak again, his voice catching, losing structure, losing confidence. For the first time since I had known him, he sounded exactly like what he was. Someone who had run out of versions of the truth. The silence after that day did not last long. It never does when someone like Adrian realizes he has lost control. It started with a letter, not even from him, from a lawyer, printed on thick paper, formal tone, carefully structured sentences trying to dress entitlement up as legality. I read it once, then again slower. Then I laughed. Because even after everything, he still thought this was negotiable. Demand for vehicle transfer. 6 months of transitional financial support. Compensation for domestic contribution. Defamation damages. I set the letter down on my kitchen counter and just stared at it. 5 years. And this was what he believed he deserved from me. Payment for existing in my life while actively undermining it. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. She didn't even wait for me to finish reading. Let me guess, she said dryly. He wants the car, money, and an apology? More or less, she sighed. Send me everything. I'll respond. Is this serious? No, she said, but it's annoying. That was the perfect word for it. Not devastating, not threatening, just annoying. Like a final echo of a version of him that still believed persistence could replace accountability. By the time her response went out, the story had already started spreading. Not because I told it, because he did, but like everything else, he told it wrong. He posted a long, dramatic version of events online, about how he had been financially controlled, about how he had been cut off without warning, about how he had given everything to a relationship only to be discarded overnight. If I had read that version of him years ago, I might have questioned myself, might have wondered if I had missed something, if I had been too harsh, if I had misunderstood him. But clarity changes that. Clarity makes lies look thin, incomplete, obvious. Still, I said nothing, because I did not need to. Someone else already had. Camille. She didn't post a rant, didn't argue, didn't defend me directly. She just uploaded screenshots. Clean, time-stamped, unedited. 5 months of Adrian saying exactly who he was when he thought no one important was listening. The internet did the rest. By the 3rd day, his post was gone. By the 4th, his comments were locked. By the 5th, the narrative had flipped so completely it almost felt surreal to watch. Not because people suddenly loved me, but because they saw him clearly. And once that happens, there is no going back. That was when his sister called, Lena. The same sister who had once smiled at me across family dinners, like I already belonged there. I almost did not answer, but something in me wanted to know. Elena, she said as soon as I picked up. No hesitation, no pretense, just my name. Hi. There was a pause, then a quiet exhale. I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't hear her, because I wanted to understand what she meant by that. For what? I asked. For him, she said. For all of it. I leaned back against the counter. He didn't tell you, did he? No, she admitted. Not everything. But you know now? Yes. Another pause. He's done this before, she said. That did not surprise me. Not really. But hearing it out loud still landed differently. How many times? I asked. Twice, that I know of. I closed my eyes briefly. Patterns. That was the thing about people like Adrian. They did not change. They refined. They adjusted details. But the core stayed the same. So this isn't new, I said. No. And you helped him anyway. Her voice softened. I thought you were different. That one stayed with me, because for a long time I had thought that too. I wanted you to be right, she added. I nodded slowly, even though she could not see it. So did I. She hesitated. Mom and Dad aren't stepping in this time. I let out a quiet breath. Good. They always fixed things before, she said. Paid off debts, smoothed everything over, made it go away. And now? They're tired. That made sense. Not growth. Not some grand revelation. Just exhaustion. Sometimes that is the only thing that finally breaks a cycle. He tried to come back home, she added. They said no. For a moment I pictured him, standing outside another door. Another version of the same conversation. Another refusal. And for the first time, I didn't feel anything about it. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just distance. He made his choices, I said. I know. There was a shift in her tone then. Something more direct. Don't take him back. I almost smiled. I'm not. Good. She exhaled again. He'll try. I know. He always does. That did not surprise me either. Because people like him don't walk away. They circle back. When options run out. When reality closes in. When the version of themselves they sold to someone else collapses. They return to the last place that worked. Or almost worked. Or could be made to work again. If the other person forgets fast enough. Not this time, I said quietly. I figured, she replied. We stayed on the line for a second longer. Then she said softer this time. You deserve better. And I realized something. For years, I had been waiting to hear that from Adrian. An acknowledgement. A real recognition. A moment where he saw me clearly. Instead, it came from someone who had only watched from the edges. Funny how that works. Thank you, I said. Then we hung up. That night, I walked through my apartment slowly. Not checking. Not searching. Just noticing. The space felt different. Lighter. Quieter. Not because he was gone. Because the version of me that tolerated him was gone too. I opened a drawer in the bedroom. The one where I had kept the travel confirmation and the anniversary note I never gave him. Empty now. Discarded. Closed. Final. For a second, I stood there with my hand resting on the edge of it. Then I shut it and turned away. Because the truth was, those plans had never really been about him. They had been about who I thought we were. And now that I knew better, I did not need anything symbolic to mark the end. It had already been marked. Clearly. Completely. And for the first time in a long time, I was not wondering whether I had made the right decision. I knew I had. If there's one thing I learned about Adrian, it's that he didn't know how to lose quietly. The lawyer didn't work. The sympathy angle didn't work. The misunderstood victim version of him collapsed faster than I expected. So he adapted. Again. 3 days after his post disappeared, someone sent me a link. A fundraiser. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity has a way of pulling you toward the last version of a person you thought you knew. The title alone made me pause. Help me escape financial abuse. I clicked, and there he was. My 5-year relationship, rewritten into a script where I was the villain. According to Adrian, I had controlled every aspect of his life, isolated him, cut off his access to money, left him homeless and emotionally broken after years of manipulation. I sat there reading it twice, not because it hurt, because I wanted to understand how far he was willing to go to avoid telling the truth. Apparently all the way. I scrolled down. 2 donations. $50 total. Both anonymous. I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary. Then I laughed. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just quietly. Because even strangers could feel something was off. The comments said it all. Didn't you post last year about your girlfriend buying you a car? How are you isolated if you're online all the time? Weren't you bragging about your lifestyle? And then the screenshots appeared. Camille again. She didn't tag me. Didn't defend me directly. She just added context. The same way she had from the beginning. Clean. Unemotional. Devastating. The fundraiser disappeared within hours. Just like his post. Just like every version of him that couldn't survive exposure. But he still wasn't done. He reached out to someone I hadn't expected. My ex. Daniel. We hadn't ended badly. Life had simply taken us in different directions. Distance, timing, priorities. Nothing ugly. We still exchanged the occasional message. A meme here. A birthday text there. Normal. Healthy. Closed. So when Daniel sent me a screenshot, I already knew it would not be good. Adrian. Hey, I heard things didn't end well between you and Elena. I think we might have similar experiences. I stared at that line for a long moment. Then Daniel's message came right after. Should I be offended or impressed? I smiled slightly. Both, he replied almost instantly. We broke up because I moved across the country. She helped me pack. I let out a quiet breath. Of course. Adrian needed allies. Needed someone to confirm his version of reality. So he went looking for people who might validate it. The problem was, my life before him did not match the story he was trying to tell. And now that he was reaching outside his own narrative, it was collapsing even faster. A few days later, I got another message, this time from someone I didn't know well, Vanessa. I stared at her name on my screen for a few seconds before opening it. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't respond immediately, not out of hesitation, out of curiosity. Another message came. I didn't know the full picture. I leaned back against my couch, reading that again. Then I typed. Neither did I. There was a pause. Then, he told me you were controlling. Of course he did. I replied. He told me you were everything I wasn't supposed to notice. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then came her reply. I guess we were both useful, just in different ways. That landed, because it was true. Painfully true. I looked out the window for a second before answering. Not anymore. This time she didn't reply right away. When she did, it was simple. No, not anymore. That was it. No friendship. No forced bonding over shared damage. Just recognition and closure. The kind that doesn't need to last to be real. The last attempt came a week later. Predictable. Almost expected. Adrian called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice. 3 times. Then I answered, not because I wanted to hear him, because I wanted to end it completely. Elena. His voice sounded different, not softer, just smaller, like someone who had run out of ways to sound convincing. Yes. A pause. I think we should talk. No. Another pause. Longer this time. I made mistakes. I didn't answer. I didn't handle things well. Still nothing. I just think 5 years deserves... An ending? I cut in. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. You already had it. That was exactly what it was. His breathing shifted on the other end. Frustration creeping in. You're really going to throw everything away? I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. No, I said calmly. I'm finally seeing what was already gone. Silence. Then, she didn't matter. I almost laughed. Of all the things he could have said, that was the one he chose. Not I hurt you. Not I was wrong. Just that. She didn't matter. I shook my head slightly. That's the problem, I said. You think this is about her. It isn't? No. I stood and walked slowly across the room. It's about the fact that you needed her. Another pause. I didn't need her. You needed the option. That hit. I could hear it in the way he stopped breathing for a second. You needed someone to compare me to, I continued. Someone to measure against. Someone to keep you from committing fully while still benefiting from what I gave you. Elena, you didn't lose me because of her, I said. You lost me because of who you became while chasing her. He didn't respond. And for the first time since the call started, he didn't have anything ready. No defense. No redirect. No performance. Just silence. I would have married you, he said finally. I let that sit. Then answered. I know. Another pause. Then softer. You were safe. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Yes, I said, I was. And that was exactly why he thought I would stay. I moved toward the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to turn on. I'm not anymore. His voice broke slightly. Elena. I'm done, I said. And this time there was no anger behind it. No sadness. No hesitation. Just truth. I ended the call before he could say anything else. And for the first time, I didn't expect him to try again, because there was nothing left to reach for. No version of me still waiting. No door half open. No story left unfinished. Just an ending he hadn't chosen and couldn't change. 3 weeks later, I saw him again. Not planned. Not avoided. Just inevitable. It was early evening. The gym was quieter than usual. That in-between hour where people either hadn't arrived yet or had already left to return to their lives. I had just finished my last set, headphones still around my neck, when the glass doors slid open. And there he was, Adrian. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I noticed he wasn't alone. The woman beside him was older, mid-40s, maybe early 50s, perfectly styled, expensive jewelry, the kind of presence that didn't try to hide what it cost to maintain it. She held onto his arm lightly, like she already thought she understood him, like she had already bought into whatever version of himself he was selling now. He saw me, froze. Then, because he was still Adrian, he recovered enough to step forward. Elena, he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite land. Wow, you look good. I took my time pulling off my gloves, setting them down, letting the silence stretch just enough. I am, I said. His smile twitched. Yeah, I can see that. The woman beside him looked between us, curious, assessing, waiting for context. This is Claire, Adrian said. I nodded politely. Elena. Claire extended her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. The kind of woman who did not see herself as competition, which meant she had not seen the full pattern yet. This is my ex, Adrian added quickly. I told you about her. I almost smiled. Of course he had. I wondered which version. The unstable one. The controlling one. The one who cut him off. Claire tilted her head slightly. The financially controlling one? She asked. There it was. I looked at Adrian, then back at her. And for a moment, I considered walking away, letting him continue, letting her learn the way I had. Slowly, painfully, alone. But then I remembered something Camille had written under those screenshots. You deserved the truth before he made you think it was your fault. So I stayed. I paid for everything, I said simply. Claire blinked. Adrian laughed too quickly. She's exaggerating. I bought the car, I continued, paid the insurance, covered half the rent, funded most of our lifestyle. Claire's expression shifted, just slightly. Adrian said... I know what Adrian said. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Not dramatically. Just enough. I also still have the screenshots, I said. The ones where he was seeing another woman behind my back while telling her I was unstable. Adrian's voice sharpened. Elena, don't do this here. I looked at him. Calm. Steady. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just not lying anymore. Claire's grip on his arm loosened. She turned to him. Is that true? He exhaled sharply. It's complicated. It always is when the truth doesn't work in your favor. I tilted my head slightly. Not really. I turned the phone toward her. Didn't hand it over. Just let her see enough. A message thread. Vanessa's name. Dates. Words he had used about both of us. Claire's eyes moved across the screen once, then again. That was enough. She looked up at him slowly. You told me your ex was unstable, she said. You forgot to mention the part where you were cheating on her. It wasn't like that, Adrian said quickly. You don't understand the context. Claire let out a short breath. The context, she said, is that you tell every woman a different version of yourself. He stepped toward her. Claire, listen. No, not loud, but final. I've heard enough. It's not what it looks like. It looks exactly like a pattern. That word again. Pattern. Funny how it kept finding him. She turned to me. Thank you, she said. Simple. Direct. Then she walked out. Adrian stood there watching her leave. For a second, I almost saw it. The exact moment it hit him. Not the loss of her. Not really. The realization that no matter how many times he reset the story, it kept ending the same way. He turned back to me. And this time, there was no charm left. No performance. Just frustration. Raw. Unfiltered. Why do you keep doing this? He snapped. Why do you keep ruining things for me? I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I had loved. I saw the pattern. Clear. Predictable. Finished. I'm not ruining anything, I said calmly. I'm just not covering for you anymore. His jaw tightened. You could have just walked away. I did. You didn't have to. I gave you 5 years, I cut in. You took 5 years. There's a difference. That stopped him. Because somewhere, buried under all the deflection and ego, he knew it was true. Jim's staff started moving closer. Apparently raised voices carried. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once like he used to when things didn't go his way. I was going to marry you, he said suddenly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. No, I said. You were going to choose whoever gave you the better deal. His face hardened. That's not fair. It's accurate. Silence. Then, you were safe. There it was. The word that had followed me through all of this. Safe. Dependable. Reliable. The version of me he thought would never leave. I nodded once. I was. I picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and looked at him one last time. I'm not anymore. He didn't stop me this time. Didn't call after me. Didn't try to grab my arm. Because finally, there was nothing left to reach for. On my way out, I passed the glass doors and caught my reflection. Calm. Steady. Clear. Not the woman who had sat across from him that night, waiting to be chosen. Not the woman who had translated neglect into excuses. Not the woman who had almost mistaken loyalty for love. Someone else. Someone who had seen everything and walked away anyway. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't open it. Didn't read it. Didn't need to. Because whatever it said, I already knew the ending. Funny thing about clarity. Once you have it, you can't unsee what was always there. And sometimes the most honest thing someone ever says to you is the insult that finally sets you free.